Well, I want to share with you another way that you can dig deeper into the Word of God. And here it is. itiswritten.study. Go online to itiswritten.study and you can access the It Is Written Bible Study Guides. 25 in-depth Bible studies that will walk you through the Bible. It's going to be good for you, and it's the sort of thing that you will want to tell somebody else about so that they can dig deeper into the Word of God and come to know the things of the Bible intimately. As you get into the It Is Written online Bible study guides, you'll understand the prophecies of the Bible, the plan of salvation, and more. So don't forget, itiswritten.study. itiswritten.study. Welcome back. My guest is Pastor Bill Warcholik. Bill, I'm really enjoying having you walking me through the way God led in your life. We're not quite up yet to where you became a pastor, but we're getting there. So you've been baptized, your wife is baptized, and now what?
Well, they offered training programs. The conference offered training programs for doing Bible studies and doing gospel work of various kinds. I went to any training program I could get. Meanwhile, God was preparing me for my next test, because the day after I was baptized, the Monday after I was baptized on that Sabbath, I went into my commander, my flight commander, and I said, "Sir, by the way, I am not going to fly anymore Friday sundown till Saturday sundown." He said, "What?" And I said, "Well, sir, I was baptized last week, Seventh-day Adventist, so I keep the Sabbath." He said, "Listen, come into my office." So I came into his office. He told me, "Sit down," so I sat down. He took out his Bible from the desk that he had. He was a Mormon. And he started flipping through the pages. He said, "You don't have to keep the Sabbath. It's okay. It doesn't matter. You're a Christian now. Christians don't have to do that. They do Sunday." And he went on chattering while I was turning through the pages of the Bible. Finally closed the Bible. He couldn't find anything about it. And he said, "Well, I don't care what you do as long as you get your job done." I said, "Yes, sir, that'll be fine." For the next year, while I was attending training classes for doing evangelist, gospel kind of work at the conference, I was also reading through the books. I was reading through The Great Controversy, Desire of Ages, Daniel and Revelation, and other books like that. So I was being filled full until the crisis hit. The crisis hit a year later. And that crisis came about because my flight commander told me one day on a Friday afternoon, I was getting ready to go home for the weekend. And he came up to me and said, "Warcholik, you have to fly this weekend because the other people can't fly for this thing and somebody got sick, so you've got to go and fly." I said, "Sir, I don't think I can find a replacement that quickly," because I was swapping with people. I'd fly on Sundays for them, they'd fly on Saturdays for me. And I said, "Sir, I don't think I can find a replacement that fast." And he said, "Come into my office." He said, "Listen now, we're not going to put up with this anymore. We're not going to have this anymore of you avoiding, you need to fly like everybody else. No exceptions. That's an order." I said, "Well, sir, my religious beliefs do not allow me to do that." And he said, "I'm going to go check with the squadron commander." So he went down the hall, talked to the squadron commander, came back, and he said, "The squadron commander agrees with me. That's it. We're not putting up with this anymore. You will fly like everybody else. You'll fly on Friday, you'll fly on Saturday, you'll fly on Sunday, whatever we tell you to do." I said, "Sir, my religious beliefs do not allow me to do that." He said, "I'm going back to the squadron commander." He went back to the squadron commander, and he came back and he said, "You realize this is wartime? We're giving you a direct order. You realize the consequences of that? Court-martial and other things?" I said, "Sir, my religious beliefs do not allow me to do that." He said, "Okay, you're dismissed. We'll deal with you on Monday." As I left the office, he picked up his phone and he called, said, "Honey, we have to cancel our plans to Las Vegas for vacation this weekend because I have to fly." I knew I was in big trouble. I went back to church that Sabbath and had everybody pray for me, and I went back on Monday morning. And he said, when I walked in the flight, he said, "I'm not talking to you. Go down and see the squadron commander." Talked to the squadron commander. And he said, "Are you sure about your decision you're making about this? You know this is going to have serious consequences?" And I said, "Sir, I'll do whatever you tell me, but I will not violate the commandments of God." "Go see the chaplain," he said. So I went to the chaplain, told my whole story as I'm telling to you. And the chaplain called back, after we were done, called back to Squadron CO and said, well, sir, he's sincere in his beliefs. He's not just trying to get out of work. So the Squadron CO said to me, he said, well, we don't know what we're going to do with you, but I'll let you know in a week or so. So I went back to work. I had committed to doing an evangelistic series, my first evangelistic series, starting in a couple of weeks. But that's at night. And I had to fly. Every other week I had to fly at night. Days one week, nights the next. And I would have interrupted my part in the evangelistic series that I was preaching for the first time. So, amazingly, I got my new assignment, report to the base operations officer. So I did. He said, okay, would it be all right with you if you worked like from 8:30 till 4:30 on Monday through Friday? And you can keep your flight pay. Just whenever you want to fly, just get a student and go fly. Keep up your flight pay. Would that be okay with you? I said, of course, yes, sir. So it was such a blessing, I couldn't believe it.
What in the world had happened to make that possible? What
God.
in the world?
There's no question about it. God did that. Really such an amazing thing. But Daniel 3, Daniel 1, Daniel 2, Daniel 3, you're faithful, God rewards you. And I have to finish the rest of the story if I can do it quickly.
Oh, yeah. You have to.
So a few months go by, and I get orders to report to the wing commander, the person in charge of the entire base. And I go, uh-oh, they finally found out about me. So I report to the wing commander. He says, and I'm standing at attention to the wing commander's office, he says, Warchalik, we have a problem on this base. I thought, uh-oh, he caught up with me. He said, operations, the pilots, are blaming maintenance for the problem. Maintenance is blaming the pilots for the problem. And this has to be fixed. Because if it isn't fixed, I'm not going to make general. He didn't actually say that, but that was what was underlined in the point, because we had Inspector General coming soon. He said, so, from now on, you are my assistant to solve this problem. You have my full authority. Go to anybody in the base as my authoritative representative and fix this problem, whatever it takes. I said, yes, sir. He said, because I know that you'll tell the truth no matter who it irritates.
That's what he said.
So
that's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah. So now I had the full authority of the wing commander to run that aspect of the base. And by the grace of God, was able to use the skills I had cultivated over the years that a pastor needs to find out how to get people to work together and to solve the problem.
Yeah, that's astonishing. I wonder what would have happened if you'd said, I'll work this once. It
right.
seems to me, and you hear this with certain stories, when you step out in faith, you give God permission to work.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't, He doesn't. You don't see miracles until you need them.
That's right.
Very often. And it's when you put yourself in that situation and say, like King Jehoshaphat said, there's no hope for us here, but our eyes are on you. Mm-hmm. That's when God can work.
Amen.
Fantastic. Amen. How do you become a pastor? Oh, no. First question. Why do you become a pastor?
I was committed to the gospel preaching from my study in the Bible, and that if God could use me as a pastor, I would do it. But even if I weren't a pastor, I kept taking the study classes. I mentioned, or maybe I didn't mention, in that evangelistic series, another lay person who was committed to it and I joined together. We went to this small mining town in Arizona. There was an abandoned Adventist church. So we contacted all the Adventists that were in the community, maybe a handful of people. And I said, we're going to clean up this church and have an evangelistic series. Would you work with us? And they said, sure. We all got working on it. We cleaned up the church, handed out flyers, and held the evangelistic series.
How did it go?
It went wonderful. The church was opened up. Everything was beautiful. And then we went back to, after that was over, we got a new pastor, and he said, I see this church is full and growing. This is wonderful. We're going to plant some churches. And he looked at me and said, you're going to plant a church over in Mesa, and you're going to plant a church over in Apache, somebody else. And so I didn't know that you couldn't do that. So I went over and we planted a church in Mesa.
And I've been to that church.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a thriving, it's a fabulous congregation today. I believe I preach, and it wouldn't be the same church, but the same congregation in Mesa, Arizona. Yeah, we held meetings in Mesa just not very long ago.
Yeah.
Fantastic. God is. So you were right there. You were part of the genesis of all of that.
Right.
Magnificent. So you were ministering.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you swing over into full-time ministry?
The conference in Arizona asked me to transition and become a pastor.
They asked you?
They'd asked me. And I said, well, I will do that. I believe God wants me to become a pastor now. But I said I have to do one thing first. I have to write back to the conference where I grew up, because my family doesn't know about Seventh-day Adventists, and my friends there don't know about it. So I feel an obligation. So if they want me to come there, I'll go there. Otherwise, I'll work here.
And?
I sent them a letter, and they said, yeah, come over here and help us.
Is that right? Yeah. So you went over to southern New England?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you enjoy about full-time ministry?
I love the people. I love working with the people. I like to see people working together and getting something done for the glory of God. I like going out and giving Bible studies because you see the light go on people's eyes, just like it went on in my eyes.
Sure.
So I love that experience.
Yeah. What did you find challenging?
Dealing with the people.
The same thing that made it great made it challenging too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's really good. You form such good relationships with people, even when you have rough times, getting people to work together. You still stay by biblical principles, but you try to be understanding.
Where did you spend, physically, geographically, where did you spend most of your pastoral ministry?
It was in Connecticut and Rhode Island.
Challenging places, I mean, that you don't hear stories of thousands being baptized in a day in Rhode Island or Connecticut. So what was that like working there, at the difficult end of the quarry, as it were? I think every place is challenging. I don't mean to intimate they're not, but I mean, the statistics will show you that it's a far less churched area of the country than many. So what was that like?
It's definitely a challenge, but God doesn't tell us to worry about the challenges, just do the work. So I just stay committed. So we're going to do evangelism, we're going to give Bible studies, and if anybody will help me, that'd be great. If you don't, I'm going to do it anyway. But we're going to work together, and we're going to make things happen for the glory of God, because Jesus is coming soon.
I might know the answer to this question, and if I do, I might know why the answer is this way. People, before they get into ministry, might say, rose-colored glasses, you get into ministry and you say, hey, some of these people are challenging, and some of these challenges are challenging, and not everybody acts like a Christian, and I thought these were the best of the best. Did you ever have any moments of disillusionment when you got into full-time ministry and said, this isn't exactly it's not as perfect as I thought it would be?
There were major problems in churches that I pastored with personnel at times, people who were church leaders, who were actually told me, well, you can't do this because I don't believe this particular aspect of the church's teachings. And I would have to tell them, I'm going to stay with the teachings that are from the Bible. And if you don't believe them, I'm not sure you're going to make it as a leader here in this congregation. Because I won't cite any illustrations,
sure.
But you just have to have the internal fortitude and courage to say, no, we're not going to teach that here. We're not going to allow that here in this church. And you have to work with the board and with church leaders. If they're not on board, then you might be looking for another place to pastor.
My thinking, too, is that your time in the military, where you're in a large organization that's got plenty of wonderful things going on inside it and, probably room for improvement here and there, you learn, put a collection of people together, and you're going to find imperfections and, not everybody is all that they ought to be, because people are people. And you'd had a lifetime of learning that.
It also have to have courage, and I'll give you maybe two quick illustrations. One is a park patrolman, because I did maintenance. The thing I like to be about being a park ranger is like a pastor. You work on the church projects physically, and then you preach, and then you go out and visit people. So this is your whole ball of wax. So as a park ranger, when I worked in the summers as a park ranger, I would work maintenance during the week, and on the weekend I was a patrolman, so I was in charge of supervising and everything. So it's a perfect fit for that training to be a pastor. I remember walking into a campsite where we had people who were illegally drinking alcohol, making a mess. And so I've come out of the woods in my uniform, and all the people are, drinking and partying and everything. And I walk up to the fireplace there at the fire pit, which is illegal. And I just stand there and look around. Finally, somebody walks over toward me, and I say, "This guy must be the leader." And I look at him, and I said, "You have to clean this place up and leave the park immediately after, right now." And there's like 30 half-drunken teenagers around. And I turned around and walked away. Another time, okay, I was doing a religious program, a drug prevention program, in a public inner-city high school. Hundreds of kids there. The vice principal, the assistant principal, escorts me to the edge of the stage where I'm going to speak from in the auditorium. And he says, "By the way, I'm going back to my office. Don't be bothered by the fact that nobody's going to listen to you. And just don't worry about it. Just say what you have to say and then leave, because nobody's going to pay any attention to you. This happens all the time." And he walks away. So I walk out on the stage.
She is a social worker, a health educator, a medical missionary, and an author with a brand new book. Her name is Karen Lynch. I'm John Bradshaw, and this is our conversation. Karen Lynch, thank you so much for joining me. Great to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
I am holding your book, Karen Lynch's Plant-Based Made Simple. Simple, nutritious, delicious. It looks good enough to eat. I'm talking about the book, not what's inside. So I'm looking forward to talking about this in just a moment. This is your first cookbook?
It is my first cookbook.
Fantastic. Looking at it, we all wish this will not be your last. Ay, ay, ay. But there's time for that. Let's talk about you a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your background, where you're from.
Well, originally, I'm from New Jersey, born and raised there. And I relocated 5 years ago to northwest Georgia, or Wildwood, right in the Chattanooga area.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. We are glad to have you here. Now, talk to me a little bit about your experience as a Christian. Were you raised in a Christian home? What's your background?
Sure. I was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist by my father. My parents divorced when I was younger, and my father ended up being able to have custody of both my sister and I. And so by God's grace, because he had a very strong foundation in the church, he was a wonderful Christian father who kept us in a home that just really glorified God.
You know, that's a little unusual, isn't it, for a divorce, and we're going back just a few years, and for the dad to have custody. How difficult was that for you, being raised in that milieu, that environment, having clearly gone through some traumatic experiences?
Sure. Well, you know, it's interesting. My father was a Christian growing up from his teens. He became a Seventh-day Adventist after he married. And my mother was from a Catholic background. However, she really, was pretty much Catholic in name, but not so much in practice. And so what happened was when my father, when he was ready to start a family, he went through the phone book because he says, I need to find a church that speaks the truth. And so he started in the A's, and he would call, speak to the pastor, and then go to the church. And so as he went down the thing, he started realizing that many churches weren't following the Bible. And he ended up finally finding a Seventh-day Adventist church. And he thought this was such an interesting story, and he told, because he called the pastor, but the pastor wasn't available. And so the wife got on the phone and said, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And he said, this is really interesting, because not one pastor's wife was willing to speak with him. They say, my husband's not home. You could talk to him. So he said, so he started asking some questions, and she had biblical answers for him. And so he's very impressed. And she says, he said, well, I'd like to come to your church. And she said, well, I don't know if you know, but we worship on Saturday, the Sabbath day. And he says, my father said, well, you know what? I'm not opposed to that, so I will meet you. And but he said at the time, I'm concerned. Maybe they're Jewish, but maybe they're Jews for Jesus.
All right.
Right? So he's like, but I'll check it out. So he went that Sabbath and was waiting. And he says, I know there's got to be Jewish people here somewhere. And he waited and he waited. And what happened was the pastor came out. Now, interestingly enough, the pastor happened to be Lebanese.
Oh, how about
that? So
that?
he looked very Semitic. So my father said, I knew that this was a Jewish congregation.
That's great.
He said, but as soon as he started speaking God's word, he said, I heard Jesus throughout his whole message, and studied and baptized, within probably, a few months of his studies with the pastor, and then started his journey as a Seventh-day Adventist.
What a fantastic story.
Yeah.
Listen, your dad just strikes me as the most remarkable sort of a guy.
Oh, he was wonderful. He sadly passed away in 1998, but, we had such a great foundation. It was a wonderful childhood, even though my parents divorced when we were younger. My mom actually moved to Florida, and so we stayed in New Jersey. And it was, like you said, it was pretty remarkable, a man raising two daughters at that time, because even his attorney said, if you ask for custody, you'll only get weekends. And my father says, well, that's not acceptable. He says, but I'm going to let you know they'll never take custody away from a mother for a father. And yet, by God's grace, my mother didn't contest it, and my father raised us. So praise the Lord.
God had a plan,
Yes.
And your dad left you a remarkable legacy, because his life pretty quickly became all about the Bible, faith in God, following the Lord. And that's what your life has been all about. You're a minister. I'll qualify that. I mentioned a moment ago you're a medical missionary. You're involved in ministry up to here. So let's talk about, before we talk about the book, and I can't wait. I have to wait. But before we talk about that, let's talk about some of the other things you do. You are involved in the Lay Institute for Global Health Training, LIGHT.
Yes.
A department of, or a ministry of, the Wildwood Health Institute, not far from here, in Wildwood in North Georgia.
Yes.
Tell me about LIGHT.
Sure. Well, LIGHT, like you said, is the Lay Institute for Global Health Training. It's a ministry that kind of started with people at Wildwood who recognized that the message of medical missionary work that needs to go to all church members was not globally being, taught as well as it could be.
Okay.
And so they put together a ministry that would go out and reach people in their own home countries, in their own home cities, and take a more like a nuts and bolts essentials of health evangelism, we call it, to the people, and train them like in a month. It's about a 125-hour course. It takes about a month to put this together. And we've been in over 95 countries and trained almost 40,000 lay people as medical missionaries.
Yeah, it's not that we have enough of that either. I think we don't have nearly enough health training, health evangelism training. Look, a world is mired in a pandemic.
Exactly.
Now more than ever, people need good health principles. People know how to look after themselves. People know how to avoid comorbidities to give themselves a far better shot at surviving COVID. We need much more and absolutely zero less of global health training. So thank God for what you're doing.
Amen, amen. Well, and my husband actually, him and I are the North American directors for our division here.
Well, that's going to keep you hopping and running.
Well, it does. It keeps us driving. We do a lot of miles every year because we travel mostly by car.
Fantastic. Hey, listen, let's go back a little bit even further, because you mentioned, we discussed, LIGHT is a ministry of Wildwood. Talk to me about Wildwood and its very rich history, the Wildwood Health Institute, which has been in Wildwood, Georgia for, well, you tell me.
Almost 80 years now. It's been there. Was the first institute, actually, that really followed the blueprint of having not only a sanitarium, which had sanitariums had popped up, at the turn of the century, but having a sanitarium along with an education department that would educate medical missionaries. So they would not only be able to work in the ministry right there at the Lifestyle Center, we call it now, but they also can go out and take that message of health to the world.
Wildwood has had a huge impact on medical missionary work and health evangelism. So thank God for what you're doing and what you're a part of.
No.
Explain it to me a little bit. So you go out your health evangelism. I want to know more about this. So what are you involved in?
Well, we do something very specific. My husband, Ron, and I, as directors in North America, what I had mentioned is going out throughout the world and taking these courses, these 1-month courses to train medical missionaries in churches all over the world. However, in the United States, it's a little different.
Sure.
And the reason why is because, we see the commitment. We've been all over the world as well doing trainings through LIGHT. And we see people traveling 3 hours each way on a bus every single day, not missing a day, to come and absorb everything we're teaching them about medical missionary work. However, let's fast forward now in the United States. You don't even see people committing to weekends sometimes.
Right.
It's sad we have these busy lives that we've probably self-imposed, to
Sure.
keep up with the lifestyle that we live here in the United States. Yeah. So we don't have a big opportunity to do these schools, the 1-month schools. So what we do is we travel to the churches by invitation. So they call us and we'll come. And what we do is we do a health emphasis program, whether it's a weekend or maybe a 1 week or 10 days of really focusing on different parts of medical missionary work, just kind of revive the church members.
Sure.
To revitalize the church to embrace health evangelism to reach their community for Jesus.
Let's make sure we're not talking past people here, because I think you and I both have a frame of reference here. But what's health evangelism? What is reaching your community using health evangelism?
Sure.
What does that look like?
Well, I have to say there are so many aspects. A medical missionary, we talk about a lot of times that every church member should be a medical missionary. That could be something as simple as your coworker saying to you, I've been meaning to lose these 10 pounds and I don't exercise enough. You know what? Hey, how about when we have lunch? Why don't we after lunch, walk in the park for 20 minutes. That is as simple as medical missionary work can be.
Sure.
But it also can go all the way to being fully trained in natural remedies, things like hydrotherapy or massage therapy, or even like herbal therapies, things of nature that God has given us. We talk a lot about the 8 laws of health and how to apply those to our lives. And so when we go to the churches, we really try to emphasize, being able to go God's way and being able to open up doors that way for people.
Now, I know somebody is concerned because they hear, you mentioned herbs and you mentioned this and that and the other, and they're wondering, does this mean that medical missionary work is opposed to conventional medicine? How do you answer that?
No, absolutely not. God has given, wisdom to doctors and nurses and medical professionals. I believe that when we go out to speak to people, even at Lifestyle Center at Wildwood, there's a time and place for medications. There's life-saving medications out there. We did a health expo, which is kind of putting together the 8 laws of health in different booths and having people, come and get screenings at all these different booths. And we were doing the Sunshine booth, and this was in Newark, New Jersey, one of our expos that we did when we were first medical missionaries. And gentleman came in and his blood pressure was, I believe, 210 over 190.
Oh, have mercy.
Now, took the blood pressure, we're like, okay, there must be something wrong here. Whoop, took the blood pressure again, must be something wrong. Called over one of the doctors, took the blood pressure. Now, at this point, is this the place where you would say, okay, I want you to go home and take some garlic, or maybe do a hot foot bath? No, this is where, you know what, I think it's best if we get you to the hospital. Because obviously, to get his blood pressure down may take some medical intervention.
Right.
However, God has a way of using natural remedies not only to prevent disease, but also to reverse it as well. And so we could, then teach about these, lifestyle changes that this gentleman could do to actually naturally lower his blood pressure and continue in a healthier way.
And it's too bad that many people don't realize that God does have a way to wind back high blood pressure and to, in many, many cases,
Sure.
reverse diabetes
Absolutely.
and other what we would call lifestyle diseases. If people just knew and were willing to invest a little, a little time,
Sure.
a little energy, a little application, there can be dramatic results, can't there, from
Absolutely.
natural interventions?
Absolutely. The thing is that we have to also remember that we have to give God time to do the miracle in our life.
Yeah.
I tell a lot of people, I say, when we apply the 8 laws of health, somebody could start eating perfect plant-based diet. They could exercise every day. They can drink their water. They can go through all these, to get the sunshine, be very temperate, fresh air, the good rest, and of course, do all those things perfectly. Could they still get sick though?
Oh, sure.
The answer is yes.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing is that when we tie those 7 laws of health with the last one, which is trust in the higher power, when we accept that God has given us these natural laws of health, it gives him permission to do a miracle in our life when we obey them. And that's really what I tell people, that, when we're obeying these things that God has given us, it is giving him permission to do the miracle.
I'm sure we'll get back to this, but I do not want to wait too long to start talking about this book. It's clear that your ministry is far broader than a book, but
Yes.
oh wow, this is quite a book. I think I just want to eat the front cover immediately. You got me with that front cover. But this is, why the book? How did the book come about? What prompted you to write Karen Lynch's Plant-Based Made Simple?
Sure. Well, I was going to be recording a cooking program. And when I went to record, they said to me, "Do you have a cookbook?" And I said, "Oh, no." And they said, "You don't have a cookbook? You don't have a cookbook?" And they kept on and it was almost like shocked, like, you don't have a cookbook? You're just going to come and do a thing? And I'm like, oh, maybe I need a cookbook. I don't know. It was new to really, really ministering with, I did cooking schools, and I can tell you a little bit more about that later, but I had done cooking schools for my church, but I had not, really gone out, in ministry and did big events or anything. And so after I was done, it was always in the back of my mind, maybe I should write a cookbook. And so when I finally realized that maybe I should put these recipes together, I really prayed about it, and God really put that book together. I didn't, pick certain recipes. I let him put the book together, and I went to a publisher, and, being a missionary, we're not salaried or anything, so we don't get a lot of income. So when they said, "Oh, we'll take care of the printing, we'll do this and that, but you have to pay for the layout and all that," and I'm like, okay. And then the price was almost $7,000 or $10,000. I'm like, okay, that could be $7 million. It's still probably unattainable for me. And so I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? And at Wildwood, I had just mentioned it to the director at the Lifestyle Center where I was teaching the cooking schools, and they're like, "We'll do it with you." And I'm like, what? And so we put our heads together. They co-copyrighted the book with me. They sponsored the book. I had them review everything that I was going to put in there to make sure it met their needs, which it did. And they were able to do my layout, all my editing, and all my pictures. And here we are today. Praise the Lord, right?
Fantastic. Yeah, God's blessing is certainly on this book. I don't 100% know where to begin, but I'm going to ask you, I think, a general question. What is it about a book like this that gets you excited?
Oh, well, what I did was, when I prayed about putting this book together, I said, "Lord, what should I put in here that would attract people, not just people who are already, plant-based, not just brand new people. Maybe it could be a book that anybody could pick up and it would be appealing to." And so I tried to find certain things that I saw in other publications. And I wanted it to be I call it Barnes and Noble quality. I wanted it to be able to be on any bookshelf. It didn't have to be just in a church bookstore or just at your church or just online. I wanted it to be something that anybody would pick up and could be attracted to this book. So I put things in like QR codes where you could scan it and I can be in the kitchen with you and doing the recipe. So we did a lot of those recipes, go right to videos. I really put a section in there of need to knows, different ingredients, different techniques, things of that nature that could help somebody, starting on a journey of plant-based health. So it was, I tried to make things, and I wanted every picture to be a big color picture so that it would be appealing. You say, okay, that looks delicious, because we with our eyes, don't we?
Oh, yeah, we sure do.
But on the front cover especially, you'll see where it says simple, nutritious, and delicious.
Yeah.
That's my catchphrase, because I believe that food should be as grown and simply prepared with simple ingredients, okay? So we shouldn't have to go to the health food store or all over the world buying all our ingredients every week. Maybe make that journey once or twice a year and get a couple things that might be some, interesting things that you might not have in your cabinet. Nutritious, well, so that's the simple part. The nutritious part is the fact is that it should be whole food, plant-based. And in my book is primarily, it's about 95% whole food, plant-based. I have some things processed in there, maybe a little tofu, maybe a little olive oil and one or two recipes here and there. But for the most part, it's whole food, plant-based.
I wanted to ask you about that, because some people hear plant-based and they think, oh, well, I've got to traverse the widest ocean to try to find some obscure berry or some ancient grain that you can only buy on a full moon. you've managed to avoid all of that. And I'm not against berries or
No,
ancient
of course.
grains. I'm
Yeah.
simply saying sometimes plant-based can just be intimidating
Sure.
because it makes good food less accessible.
Exactly.
You've avoided that somehow. That takes some skill.
Well, that's why when I do cooking schools, especially, I try to make sure that people can get all the ingredients locally, so they can see what I demonstrate. They can actually do. That's where the simple, nutritious, and then delicious. If it doesn't taste good, then who's going to eat it, right?
Exactly right. Well, we're going to eat it, and maybe by the time this program is over, I will have started munching on the cover because the book looks great. We'll talk about some of the specifics in just a moment. She is Karen Lynch, and I am John Bradshaw. This is our conversation. We'll be back with more in just a moment. I'm John Bradshaw from It Is Written, inviting you to join me for 500. 9 programs produced by It Is Written, taking you deep into the Reformation. This is the 500th anniversary of the beginning of the Reformation, when Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg, Germany. We'll take you to Wittenberg and to Belgium, to England, to Ireland, to Rome, to the Vatican City, and introduce you to the people who created the Reformation, who pushed the Reformation forward. We'll take you to sites all throughout Europe where the Reformers lived and in some cases died. We'll bring you back to the United States and take you to a little farm in upstate New York and show you how God spread the Reformation here. Don't miss 500. You can own the 500 series on DVD. Call us on 888-664-5573 or visit us online at itiswritten.shop. Welcome back to Conversations, brought to you by It Is Written. My guest is Karen Lynch, a Cornell University trained. Tell me a little bit about that. That's impressive. You've studied at Cornell.
Well, I did a program called their plant-based nutrition program. So I got a certificate in plant-based nutrition from their Center for Nutritional Studies. It was really founded by T. Colin Campbell, who is really a forerunner in plant-based nutrition.
Sure.
If you remember the China study, a lot of people know about the China study. And he really has taken, the secular world into a more plant-based, and medically studied, where it really had the benefits of plant-based. Now, of course, we've done our own studies throughout our church with Loma Linda and the health studies there. But it's nice that we also have that to validate the things that we already knew.
Absolutely. Okay, talk to me a little bit about the book. Some things in the book that you like.
Oh, you mean recipes?
Yeah, recipes. That might be all of them. I don't expect you to like some and dislike others, but
no.
Let's talk about a couple, some of your favorites.
Well, I have to say, it's funny because people always say, oh, are these all your favorite recipes? And I always tell them, no, I actually cook a lot of different things at home. These are the ones that the Lord really impressed me to put in the book.
Sure.
I said, but some of them are my favorites. One of our breakfast favorites that we have, and we do this like on Sabbath every morning, is I don't make them on Sabbath, I make them ahead of time, but we do the corn and oat waffles. That's actually the first recipe in the book, in the breakfast section. And those are, when I got that recipe together, my husband said, I will never eat another waffle. He loves them. And with some nice fruit sauce, especially we do a lot of blueberry fruit sauce because that's one of our favorites. Oh, yeah. So that's great. Let me try to think of one of my favorites in the entrees in there. Well, one of the all-time favorites, and it's a fan favorite too, I do it in a lot of cooking schools, is mac and cheese.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, the mac and cheese, because the cheese sauce, I really, my husband is actually from Tennessee. He was raised here in Tennessee mostly. And Southern cooking is really home cooking, comfort foods, and mac and cheese is one of the biggest comfort foods. I mean, not only for a holiday, not only for a weekend, for a dinner, but you have the sniffles, I'll make you mac and cheese. I mean, it's like mac and cheese goes with everything in the South. And so I kind of put that cheese sauce together. And, it's funny because when my husband and I first got married, we were vegetarians, but not completely plant-based. So I had to really ramp up my mac and cheese recipe because I was competing with his mom, who was making mac and cheese her whole life, right? And so, and he loved it. But then when I started making it plant-based, he said to me, I like this even better. So,
even better.
And he's a Southern boy.
I'm looking at the recipe here. And I'm not going to give the game away because I'm just not. One thing I notice here, and I've seen this in several of the recipes, 2 teaspoons of Himalayan pink salt, or salt of your choice.
Yeah.
So what is it about the Himalayan pink salt that you like?
Well, it's interesting because learning a little bit about salt, Himalayan pink salt is actually mined about 5,000 feet below sea level. And so it's like 99.9999% pure, okay? And it has 84 trace minerals in it. So and now trace minerals are minerals that we only need in small amounts in our body, but we have to get them from foods. Our body doesn't manufacture them. So getting 84 trace minerals, I think, wow, that's a great bonus. Comparing it to like something like a sea salt, a lot of sea salts have probably about 60 trace minerals in them, which isn't too bad either.
Not
That's
bad,
pretty good.
sure.
The only thing though, and I think that mined sea salts are the ones that I would recommend, like kind of like that, maybe like real salt, which is from Utah. I could tell you a great story about that. I'll tell you that in a minute.
Okay.
But then also like the Celtic sea salts. Those are ones from the UK that are mined. Now, there are also sea salts that they get from the ocean. Those are not ones, though, that I really recommend. And, sea salt really came on the market probably 20 years ago and became like the super fad. Everybody thought they were doing themselves a huge favor. And they had in the sense of minerals. But what we do find now is all the ocean dumping and things like that, there's something called microplastics. And microplastics are these minuscule plastic that has not been fully dissolved. And so the studies show that actually every person we get microplastics through the air, in our foods, and all this. We eat about approximately a credit card's worth of plastic a week.
Oh.
Can you imagine that?
No.
One whole credit card. So I'm not trying to get more plastic. So that's why I don't recommend those regular sea salts. But then, of course, there's regular table salt that most people are, the Morton and the Diamond and whatever salt you would use. Unfortunately, that has 0 trace minerals because it's so overprocessed. Not only are they bleaching it to make it nice and white, they are using aluminum derivatives in the process as well. And there's such a link to like dementia and Alzheimer's with aluminum and aluminum toxicity. And then, of course, the other thing too is that they use something called yellow prussiate of soda.
Right.
Yellow prussiate of soda is actually an anti-clumping agent because, back in the day, people would put like rice in their salt shaker so that it wouldn't get clumpy. But you don't see that anymore. People just pour and it pours out. It's because they have an anti-clumping agent in it. It is a known carcinogen. And so it's one of those things that you've got now bleach in there, aluminum, a known carcinogen, plus you've now stripped out all the minerals out of, the salt. They actually do throw a little iodine back in because iodine's so important for like your thyroid. And they do put that in there. But it's not the natural sourced iodine,
Every good plant-based cookbook has to have a recipe like this, but this is the any bean veggie burger. It's ordinarily black bean. I was surprised to see any bean.
Yeah, I actually use white beans more than I would use black beans in that one.
No kidding.
But you can use any bean.
All right.
That's why any bean, whatever bean you have at home, whatever bean you like, I happen to like it with a white bean, like a cannellini bean or like a white kidney bean. That's
Wow, it looks good. The photography team did an outstanding job. I noticed you have a jackfruit recipe in here. Jackfruit's become popular in recent years, and for good reason. It's good.
It is. It's a great meat substitute, especially for like those shredded chicken types of things. Or I've actually done a faux pot roast with jackfruit as well. It's not in the recipe. It's not in the cookbook, though. I just kind of put that together one day for my husband, and it came out excellent.
Yeah. Where do we go here? I'm getting past the Primavera and the Southwestern chickenless salad, the sides and the sauces. That's what I was seeing a minute ago. I mean, I'll give you one guess. Dessert.
Dessert.
Oh, these look good.
Which ones are they?
All of them. What are you talking about?
Bad.
All of them. Banana date nut cookies. Karen's chocolatey, chunky carob candy clusters. Yeah, they wouldn't last a minute around here. Carob hazelnut mousse. Is that as good as it looks and sounds?
They came out excellent. When I put that together, I was doing a program called Italian Made Simple. All my cooking shows that I've done is whatever made simple.
Yeah.
And one of the first ones was Italian Made Simple. And I said, well, I want to get a dessert that kind of, is with my Italian heritage because I'm Italian. And And so I said, oh, hazelnut, it's like kind of that Nutella flavor, you know, that people know and love. And that came out excellent, really.
Hazelnuts are just the most fantastic things out there.
They are delicious.
Oh, yeah, I think they're underrated, undereaten. They are magnificent.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. So I'm just going to divert a little bit here and ask you a more general question.
Sure.
When it comes to cooking, and okay, two questions. First, you said made simple. Are these really simple recipes? I'm
going to tell you that those recipes are so simple. Sometimes I always say I'm a little embarrassed how easy I made the recipes because I don't want to be, I'm not a complicated person. I don't want to spend all day in the kitchen.
Right.
And you know, we were doing mission work in India, Ron and I, and I noticed that the women would get up because we were a lot of people were, you know, we were staying at different places, so people were cooking for us every day. And they would get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and cook breakfast, and we would eat like at 8 o'clock. Then they would clean up, and then they would cook lunch all morning, and then they would serve lunch just say at 12 noon. Then they would clean up, and then they'd start cooking dinner. We would eat dinner maybe at like 5 or so. And by the time they cleaned, they didn't leave the kitchen until 8 o'clock at night. They were there from 6 in the morning till 8 at night. I said, wow. I said, I wish I could simplify their life a little bit because I just felt like that was their whole existence was just in the kitchen. But I don't think in our busy lives that we need to, you know, spend that much time. I think we should make things simple because we're using simple ingredients. Make them simply prepared, you know, make them easy because also too, when we overcook things, we also lose nutrition too because we bring them up to a temperature that kind of breaks down the enzymes and things of that nature. We don't want to do that. We want to eat things, you know, as grown, as fresh as possible, and very simply prepared.
Now, you just about blew me out of my chair here when you started talking about food cooked in India. Because I've been long convinced that when we get to heaven, we'll discover that the people in charge of food preparation are Indian. What's your favorite food? Ethnic, national, whatever kind of a food?
Oh, my goodness.
And if it's not a favorite, what's one or two or three or four that you like? You know, Italian or Chinese or whatever.
I'm going to say I eat a lot of Asian food. And the reason why is, too, is because it's very easy to find things that are full of vegetables and are plant-based in the more Asian culture. You know, when we get into other cultures, they really focus. If you look at like European cooking, you'll see a lot of meat on that potato, on that plate. Then some potato, a lot of carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are good for us. I mean, most of our food should be carbohydrates, but in a complex carbohydrate, not a refined carbohydrate. You know, so we want to really, you know, I try to focus. So I love Asian food, but I like all ethnic foods. You know, I can find something everywhere I go. You know, and it's kind of a fun journey when you travel as a missionary because you get to taste so many different culinary treats. You know. Yeah,
absolutely. What do you think are a couple of things that everybody should have in their kitchen that maybe many people don't? And it could be ingredients or tools.
Sure.
What's something that someone likely doesn't have in their kitchen? You say, you got to have this.
I think if you're transitioning to a more plant-based diet, the first probably big purchase that you should make, and I always have a good way to get this purchase, is a high-speed blender.
Oh, yeah.
I personally have a Vitamix, and I love my Vitamix. I wouldn't trade it. I actually have more than one because I take one on the road. I don't want to take the one from home. I like to make sure everybody has their place, right?
Sure.
But the Vitamix is probably the most cherished piece of equipment that I have. And I always say they run like a Cadillac, but they also cost like a Cadillac too, right?
Right.
And so how do you get a Vitamix? Many times people are on a budget, and I kind of understand that. But I always say to, especially the ladies in my cooking classes, I'll say, you know, if you want a Vitamix, you start with in January, you know, you've got Valentine's Day, you've got your birthday, Mother's Day, you've got anniversaries and Christmas. Right there, 5 holidays, right? If you just say, oh, I have if you want to just give me money toward my Vitamix, you'll have it within a year, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Nice and easy, right?
That's smart.
If everybody, maybe a lot less than in a year if everybody jumps in and gives you a little bit for your birthday, right?
So what does that high-speed blender do for you that because someone's saying, I'm just going to cut a corner and get something not quite as good. What are you missing out on by getting something not as good?
Well, one of the things that I find that, you know, an ingredient, if you want to say another ingredient, an ingredient that, you know, people will transition to more is using nuts. Nuts and seeds, let's say, too, because there are people with nut allergies, but nuts and seeds. And, you know, the high-speed blender not only saves time in the kitchen, that's the bonus, but it really will blend things in such a manner that would not have any grittiness, creaminess. And, I just find that like a high-speed blender is just a necessity when it comes to making sauces and soups and milks, nut milks, and, whatever, everything. I probably use the Vitamix more than anything in the cooking. In cooking in my kitchen.
Okay, so tell me another one or two things that people should have in their kitchen that maybe they don't, maybe ingredients that people aren't using enough of.
I think an ingredient that is a great ingredient that has a benefit as well as it's a flavor enhancer, let's say, is nutritional yeast flakes. Now, nutritional yeast flakes are actually made by taking the yeast that's grown on molasses, and they deactivate it by heating it up, and then they grind it up, and they actually add some B vitamins, especially B12. And B12 is one of the vitamins that a lot of people lack.
Sure.
And so it's nice as a condiment, but it has a nutty, creamy, cheesy kind of flavor.
A lot of cheese sauces use that as the
Exactly.
As the
it's a base ingredient in a lot of cheese sauces. I have a few in my cookbook. I've got some that are made with nuts, some were made with, like a potato cheese, and I use the nutritional yeast a lot, as a condiment in cooking. But I think that's another ingredient that really, will really help enhance food, but it also has a health benefit with the B vitamins.
I'd like to ask you more about desserts, but I'm going to move past them, as challenging as it is, because, wow, they look good. Here's a section that can just kind of change a meal. Dips and dressings.
Yes.
If you got the right dressing, the right dip, you can turn something pretty mundane into something really wow.
Exactly. I think sauces, gravies, sauces, dips, dressings, all of those things really have to have a real punch of flavor. But we can get that even if we're cooking plant-based. People sometimes think, that, you're going to lose flavor or you're going to compromise. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think that you compromise at all. In fact, I think that your palate gets expanded with so many, such freshness and so many flavors by embracing these foods that maybe we kind of overlook or we overcook or we buy in a can versus getting fresh. So I think that, these things are definitely will enhance our experiences.
I'm going to ask you a question here that the entire program could be taken up with this one answer. So it's a little unfair just to spring it on you in the hope that we can get this done in about 90 seconds or 2 minutes. But why plant-based? Why should a person embrace the idea or start leaning towards plant-based foods?
Sure. A few reasons. I think first, if we go back biblically speaking, if we go back to the Garden of Eden, we'll see that our man's original diet was the nuts and the seeds and the fruits.
It was plant-based, wasn't it?
That's right. Then after sin, God actually incorporated the vegetables, right, and the herbs of the field. So we are physiologically are built for a plant-based diet, right? So, and I like to tell people when they ask me questions like that, not only if we look at our anatomy, we'll see that we have teeth that are grinding teeth. We're not carnivores. We don't have teeth like a cat. A cat rips and tears flesh. We don't have those kind of teeth. So we are there to grind foods. We're also built to eat fiber. A cat doesn't have to eat any fiber. They could be a diet of 95%, fiberless diet, and they're fine because they have an esophagus, a stomach, and everything goes out. For us, we have an esophagus and a stomach, but then we have our small intestines, which absorbing our nutrition. Then we have our large intestines that is pushing out the waste. But without fiber, fibrous foods, high fiber, such as fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, things of that nature, we are not, especially in the United States, we do not get enough fiber. And what happens is that we're not pushing these things out. Plant-based diet, medically speaking, most plant-based vegetarians probably have a good, and this is a rough statistic, maybe 95% less likely to have like colon cancer because we eat a much more high fiber diet. So we have to, understand that our body is built for this. So, and of course, with disease, 94 to 96% of all disease is actually lifestyle. So only 4 to 6% is actually true genetics.
That's a crazy statistic, isn't it?
It is, because if you think about this, we might have a genetic propensity for something, but we have to trigger it with lifestyle. You've probably heard this before, but if lifestyle was a gun, if genetics were a gun, your lifestyle pulls the trigger. So a gun is not dangerous unless the trigger is pulled, right? So what happens? Well, 94 to 96% is lifestyle, but you know almost 70% of that lifestyle is exactly what we eat. And that really is what does a lot of determining of the, of the genes and the mutation of the genes and, of course, disease. And so changing our diet and, to a healthier plant-based diet can be extremely, extremely preventative of disease and, of course, reversal of disease.
Oh, fantastic. Karen Lynch's Plant-Based Made Simple. The book is a masterpiece. But there's a question I want to ask you. Even the title of the book gives rise to a question. I'll ask that question in just a moment. We'll be back with more with Karen Lynch. I'm John Bradshaw. This is our conversation brought to you by It Is Written.
If you enjoy coloring, then you're going to love the Buried Treasure Coloring Book from My Place with Jesus. The Buried Treasure Coloring Book has more than just pictures to color. You'll also enjoy activity pages, each accompanied by their very own audio story.
Mr. Dixon came across a small, well-weeded rice patch out in the middle of a field.
Get ahead of a rainy day or a relaxing evening as a family and order the Buried Treasure Coloring Book from It Is Written.
Welcome back to Conversations brought to you by It Is Written. My very special guest is Karen Lynch. She's the author of Karen Lynch's Plant-Based Made Simple, which gives rise to a question. Karen Lynch's Plant-Based Made Simple. Now, someone might have called that Vegan Made Simple, but you have called this Plant-Based Made Simple. So I want to find out if there's a distinction, a delineation. Why are we talking plant-based and not using the term vegan here?
Sure. Well, I actually, when I do cooking schools, when I talk to people, I always tell people I'm plant-based or whole food plant-based, technically. But the reason why I called the book Plant-Based Made Simple was because the word vegan, now that's probably the most common term for people that take animal products out of their diet.
Sure.
Right? So, but the interesting thing is that a vegan diet, although not only takes animal products out of their diet, but also stays away from using things that are animal products, such as
leather,
leather,
don't use honey.
Exactly, things of that nature. And I said, well, the reason why, I've made these changes in my own life was because of the nutritional way, reasons why. But the word vegan really stems beginning from Far Eastern religions, because there was a time when people started not eating animals because they believed in reincarnation.
Sure.
And so if mom passed away and she came back as a chicken on your farm, it would not be a good thing, right? That if you had chicken for dinner one night and it was your mom.
Yeah.
And so because of that, that's where the philosophy of a vegan diet came from. And then if we go now fast forward to the United States, it became very much more like animal activism.
That's right.
But the vegan diet doesn't necessarily have to be nutritious. And a good example, I tell people in my cooking class all the time, if I'm going to cook you breakfast tomorrow, would you be excited? They always say yes. And I'll say, so when you come to the table and I lift up the top of the tray and you'll see all the food there and it's Oreo cookies. I said, you don't have to tell me if you like Oreo cookies, but that's vegan.
That's vegan, that's right.
But is it nutritious?
French fries are pretty vegan as well.
That's right. Oh, that's a good one too, yeah. So if you think about that, I always say a vegan diet doesn't necessarily have a component. Now, there are people who are vegan, they call themselves vegan, that are much more nutritious conscious. But a vegan diet, you can go to the store and buy vegan food, and it can be full of preservatives and a lot of junk, a lot of refined sugars and refined flours, but they're vegan.
Yeah, that word vegan, it's become a bit of a loaded term, hasn't it? You know what? You just answered a question I had planned to ask you, but let me do that. Someone is saying, I can get Karen Lynch's Plant-Based Made Simple. That burger on the front cover looks good enough to eat. It's simple, but man, it's still going to take me some time. So I'm going to stop at Trader Joe's on the way home, not to pick on Trader Joe's. And I'm going to go and buy a couple of vegan, plant-based, ready-to-heat and eat foods. Why wouldn't you, right? Why wouldn't you?
The problem that we face when we purchase foods, they're always processed. Processed food is a huge problem in the lifestyle of the United States, standard American diet. It has an acronym, Standard S, American A, Diet D. What does it spell? Sad.
So sad.
Yes. And so what happens is people get into that routine of quick grab and go type of stuff, throw it in the microwave. Even microwaves, I don't recommend using them so much, for cooking. Every once in a while somebody might have to heat something up, but people are using this as a way of life. Tons of preservatives, tons of refined, sugars and oils and things of that nature. And so is there a place for those foods? I always tell people, yeah, there is. We're on the road 40 weeks out of the year sometimes. Can I eat every meal, a home-cooked meal? The answer is no. Can I make better choices? Well, yes, I can. Sometimes my options are maybe going to Trader Joe's, but I call that the exception, not the rule.
Sure.
We do have to live in this world, and so we are faced sometimes with those things. But making foods yourself, you not only have the ability to monitor the salt. That's another thing with packaged foods. You're going to find high salt, high sugar, and high oil. Those are the three biggies. And low fiber. Those are the things. But you can monitor your seasonings. You can make things to your palate's taste. You're using fresh ingredients, and so there's so much benefit. I like for people to think that you have to work smarter, not harder. When I was mentioned about my waffles, I do a whole, truckload of waffles. When I'm going to make waffles, I make a ton of waffles, and then I freeze them.
Sure.
I have them ready. I take them out the night before. I let them defrost. I throw them in the oven and just to crisp them up a little bit, and voila. There's nothing easier than that. And so, you can do this, and if you just take a little time to prepare, you can really, do some meal planning and do a good job of that.
And there's another facet too, isn't there, when it comes to preparing food? There's just something cool about it. It can be a very social time if it's you and somebody else preparing the food together. There's just something wonderful about handling food and preparing food and seeing it become transformed from what it was to what it is, and then eating the work of your own hands and preparing and providing for others. There's something special about that process, at least I think there is.
I agree. I think time in the kitchen, I remember I mentioned I'm from an Italian family, and everybody congregates in the kitchen no matter what. We're always in the kitchen together, and it's just kind of a bonding experience. So it's nice for relationships as well.
Yeah.
But again, putting things together and seeing the fruits of your labor on the table is really a blessing, and I really can share that with others too.
One thing I've not asked you about today, gluten-free recipes are everywhere. Gluten-free has become a very, very big thing. How does your book approach gluten-free food?
Sure. Well, I notice too when I teach classes that there are a lot of people that have gluten sensitivity, gluten intolerance, and then of course there's celiac disease, which is extremely dangerous for people to eat when they eat gluten. It damages their system. But the gluten itself in the United States, we see a high content of gluten. Gluten really helps the texture of things.
Yeah. And
so what happens is that we hybridize our wheat to make it higher gluten content. So people that might have a little sensitivity, now all of a sudden feel some of these maybe bloating or those gassiness or those little bit of stomach discomfort. So it's funny because when I put this cookbook together, and then I said I wanted to make sure I identified if you had a special dietary need that you would know this recipe identifies that you could have it or not.
Yeah, okay.
So I put a little legend in there where it'll say gluten-free, oil-free, soy-free, or nut-free.
Yeah.
So at the recipes. So when you're looking at that, or it could say gluten-free option, where I might give you an alternative to have the gluten.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I put that recipe together, there's about 98 recipes in the cookbook. I found out when I counted them all up that 75 of them have gluten-free or gluten-free options.
Hold on, 75 out of 90 or so recipes are gluten-free or gluten-free options.
Yes, exactly.
That's phenomenal. You did not set out to do that.
No, not at all. And it's funny because I'm not gluten-free at home. We try not to eat a tremendous amount of gluten, but we don't have any kind of sensitivity.
Sure.
But how the Lord put that together again, it's all on Him. I give Him the honor and the glory.
Well, that is fantastic. So listen, in case you missed that, if you're looking for recipes that are also gluten-free, you have come to the right place. This is a book for you. In putting the book together, what did you find challenging? Were there any things that this is a grind, or I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get over this hump?
Oh, I had a big challenge because I am a cook that is creative in the kitchen, but I'm not a person that measures a lot. So So what happened was...
that's my wife all the way. And she'll make something just unbelievable, drop dead, fantastic. Not heart attack, drop dead, you know what I'm talking about. And then tomorrow, for example, it isn't going to be the same because, well,
I don't remember exactly. I just threw it in.
Put in this much. I don't know.